Want to know 10 powerful health optimization insights from world-leading experts? In this special recap, we're breaking down the most eye-opening insights, wildest experiments, and biggest breakthroughs from mind-body peak performance in 2024. Whether you missed an episode or just want a refresher on the most transformative bioharmonization and longevity tips, this is your chance to absorb a year's worth of cutting-edge health wisdom all in one episode. Everything discussed today will be linked in the show notes for this episode, which you will find at mindbodypeak.com/197. To begin with today, we'll dig into an episode titled The Shocking Dark Side of Keto, Intermittent Fasting, and Caloric Restriction, and what to do about it. This was episode number 172 with Jay Feldman. And in this clip, he breaks down the biochemical differences between being a fat burner, someone that runs on fatty acids, and being someone that derives the majority of your energy from carbohydrate sources. Now, of course, being able to burn both types of fuels is ideal, but there's a widespread notion that running predominantly on fat is a better, more efficient and effective thing. Jay is an independent health researcher, and in this clip, he breaks down the differences between glucose and ketones. What I like about that clip is it shows that we're able to derive plenty of energy purely from fats, but it's not necessarily optimal, at least when we look at it through an evolutionary biology lens. If you have access to high carbohydrate foods, the unprocessed, unrefined versions, such as ripe fruits, that's a signal of abundance and prosperity to your biology, which then enables you to have a high metabolic rate and all the benefits that go along with that. How do you explain the difference in metabolism and the output of energy from glucose versus ketones and fat in the body and the brain? Because that's one of the most common things that I used to believe, and I read, and it seems to be parroted around the internet, that ketones burn cleanly and glucose is a dirty fuel. Therefore, you want your brain to run exclusively on ketones, and you want to minimize glucose as much as possible, even though it's not really possible. But yeah.
Yeah, so many misconceptions wrapped up in there. When we're comparing the biological context of when we're mostly relying on fat versus when we're mostly relying on carbs, and fat and ketones tend to go together because essentially we're only going to have ketones if we're really depleted in carbs or calories. That's the only time where we're going to produce ketones. So as a starting place, it's really a question of carbs versus fat, especially also because even when we're fully on a ketogenic diet, most of our energy needs are coming from fat. In our brain, about 60% will come from ketones and the rest will still be from glucose. And in the rest of our bodies, again, most of it is going to be fat. Really, ketones aren't used so much in the rest of the body, mostly just in the brain. So when we think about this biologically, the times when we're mostly relying on fat and some ketones are during periods of intense and extended stress, like famine or starvation, or if we are in a heavily stressful environment, maybe we're doing excessive exercise, like we're running away from something or we're battling something or whatever it is, these sorts of times of intensely high energy demands and a lack of energy supply. And when that happens, we rely on our backup fuel, the fuel that we store as our reserves in body fat, which is fat. And then the opposite is when we're well fed, when we have lots of abundant food available, we're relying more on carbohydrates, especially in more abundant places and times where you have more carbohydrate-based foods available, like fruits, as an example. Now, in the former state of stress, famine, starvation, when we're relying on fat as a fuel, that is a time of conservation, right? We were talking about this earlier in terms of the kind of bank account analogy, but when there's not a lot of fuel coming in, that's when we shift toward fat. And it's also time when we want to shift toward conserving the amount of fuel we have and the amount of energy we're using, because we're recognizing that this environment is not supportive of a high amount of output, right? We don't have a lot of high quality fuel coming in and we're relying on our reserves. And that is built into the physiology of how we use fat and carbohydrates. So when we're oxidizing fat, when we're burning fat in the mitochondria, it ends up providing various signals that encourage the conservation of fuel. It helps us slow down the rate at which the engines are producing energy so that we can conserve the fuel and run on it for longer, in comparison with glucose, which is going to be a much higher output and produce a lot more energy, which is great for when we have a lot of fuel available and we're not in a kind of high stress environment. So that's the kind of bigger picture context. And then along with that, there are hormonal implications or hormonal effects of using fat versus carbs that further shift us toward more of the kind of starvation state versus the abundance state. And this has to do with certain stress hormones. So when we're relying mostly on fat, we're going to be upregulating stress hormones like glucagon and adrenaline and cortisol. And short term, these help us deal with whatever issue we're facing and they upregulate metabolism. But long term, they do the opposite and they suppress our metabolic rate. They turn down our non important or less important functions and eventually also encourage us to store as much body fat as we can so that we can deal with the future famine. Any food that we have, we want to try to store it so that we can survive. And these are basically survival type hormones, and they turn down our high output hormones like thyroid hormones. So they turn down the thyroid hormone production and conversion, and they turn down the reproductive hormone production. Turn down testosterone, turn down progesterone, and will cause that shift toward more of a hibernation state in the long term. So that's the big picture context. And then we can dig into the specifics of, we've got these different fuels, glucose, fat, and ketones, and we're using them in varying amounts at different times and in different places like the muscle versus the brain. And what are all the differences there? So
next up, we have actually a continuation of an interview with Jay Feldman. This one's a separate episode number 173, where we break down what happens when you consume different fats, and particularly the polyunsaturated fatty acids, the PUFAs, aka omega-3s and omega-6s. Obviously, this one's a bit more controversial as he highlights some potential downsides of omega-3 fatty acids, the dominant fats in fish oil and algae oil and other so-called heart-healthy oils. While they are essential fatty acids, meaning you need to have some of them in your diet because your body does not produce them, and technically you would die without essential fatty acids, the actual amount of omega-3s and omega-6 fatty acids you need to live is negligible. We're talking in the milligram ranges. Now, personally, I still get some through fish oil and real whole food sources. It's virtually impossible to avoid, but I have all but stopped supplementing omega-3 for this very reason. And also because most of the supplements on the market are not very effective and often contain other things that you don't want to consume. And you can even tell if the product has spoiled before it arrives at your house by breaking open the fish oil capsule and tasting it. If it tastes rancid, that means you're just putting a rancid oil in your body, and it might show up fine on your blood work. It might show that you actually improve certain biomarkers. But as we discuss in this episode with Jay, the context behind the appearance of improved biomarkers also matters a lot. For example, if your LDL goes down, that might be seen as a good thing. But if your oxidized LDL goes up, as is the case with industrial seed oils, that's actually a worse thing because oxidized LDL has a much higher correlation with cardiovascular complications. All right, here's Jay explaining the impact of PUFAs on cellular membranes and overall cellular health.
The fats that we consume get incorporated into every cell in our bodies. And we want to have very stable cellular structures, right? The walls and the kind of separations, what are called membranes in the cells are all made up of fats. And the more unsaturated those fats are, the leakier they are. And generally, leakiness is not a good thing. One place that it's especially a problem is in the mitochondria, in the engines of the cells. Basically, in order to produce energy, we create a gradient. It's an electrochemical gradient that allows potential energy that allows us to produce ATP. You can kind of think of it like a hydroelectric dam where we pump a lot of water to one side and then push that water through one specific area that spins a wheel or turbine or something that allows for energy to be produced. We do something very similar inside our cells, inside our mitochondria, and the wall is made up of fats. And so whether we're talking omega-6s or omega-3s, they basically are much less stable and they don't provide a very solid wall. So the more of those we consume, it's basically like the more holes we have inside of this wall, this dam, and the more water that leaks through that's not actually being used to produce energy. So we lose out on a lot of potential energy in that way. Not to mention that those parts of the wall are also really susceptible to damage, and we're in a very highly reactive environment. And when you damage those fats, you're not effectively producing energy. Our bodies actually, or the cells will actually turn off energy production there because of how dangerous and damaging it is. It's like turning the plant off because it's creating a lot of smoke and exhaust and pollution. Not to mention it's really dangerous. It could explode or something like that. And so that's what our cells will do when they're producing a lot of reactive oxygen species and a lot of lipid peroxides, and the presence of these very unsaturated fats increases susceptibility to that. So those are some of the biggest concerns.
Okay, now I've got a clip for you that's all about an herb that our guest describes as the relaxation of alcohol, the energy of caffeine, yet instead of hammering your liver and your stress hormones, it actually promotes natural detoxification. It balances your blood sugar. It cleans your mouth more effectively and safely than chlorhexidine. And best of all, it's actually a plant that is highly revered in the ancient system of Ayurveda, and you can sip on it as a tea. This is from an episode titled How to Use the Pharmacy in Your Pantry, Fermented Foods, Kombucha, Tulsi, Oxymels, and Manuka honey. And if you want to hear the whole thing, this was episode number 155.
Tulsi is holy basil. I mean, you're in India right now. If you're a Hindu, you generally have a Tulsi plant that you worship as a deity. It's usually in a ceramic pot in the house. And Tulsi is literally worshipped as a deity. And you take a leaf and have it every day. Often you dip it in water, make holy water, and it makes an amazing tea. It's a form of basil, Oxymum sanctum, holy basil. But in the West, it's not used that much. But whereas in India, it's called the incomparable one, or Mother Nature's gift to humanity. And it's one of the few plants you can eat from every day. I grow Tulsi bushes outside, but you can literally eat a few leaves every day, and the plants will stay healthy and keep growing and producing. The flowers themselves are really pretty. Bees love them. So they've always got bees around them. So it's great for bee forage. But the plants themselves will repel mosquitoes and fighting insects. The smell will just enhance memory and cognition if you make tea out of it. And I had a PhD student spent 4 years researching Tulsi, showing that even just a single cup of Tulsi tea, which I've got now, can improve cognitive function and reduce blood pressure and have positive effects on the whole cardiovascular system. So Tulsi we call it, I wrote an article about it, a peer-reviewed article that's open source called Tulsi, a herb for all reasons. And it often gets cited. I get citation alerts with my papers, and that's one that gets cited a lot because Tulsi, it controls blood sugar. So it has all the benefits of sugar drinks, but it regulates blood sugar rather than giving you sugar spikes. And I've got a whole lot, we can talk about sugar spikes later if you want. I've got a whole poem that discusses sugar spikes. It gives you the alertness without the jitteriness of caffeine, and it gives you the relaxation without the depressant effects of alcohol. So if you think about modern beverages are sugar, caffeine, and alcohol. Every restaurant, every aeroplane, every hotel, you can buy sugar, caffeine, and alcohol drinks. But Tulsi has all the benefits of those three without the drawbacks. So it'll enhance liver detoxification instead of hammering your liver like caffeine and alcohol does. It's a better mouthwash than chlorhexidine. So just rinsing with Tulsi tea, so you can leave it cold. I'll make a hot cup of Tulsi tea before I go to bed, have some, and then I'll leave it in the morning and just rinse with it. And you can swallow it. And so it's a better mouthwash than chlorhexidine. You can swallow it, enhances liver detoxification, balances blood sugar. It stimulates the immune system, so immunostimulatory, balances blood pressure, cholesterol. It's like the herb that is beyond all other herbs. And if you think about Ayurveda, they have the biggest range of, and even Indian cooking has the biggest range of herbs and spices out of any cuisine, because they have herbs from the rainforest and from the jungle and from the desert and from the mountains, and they call Tulsi the incomparable one. So compared to turmeric and all these other amazing herbs, Tulsi is considered like the ultimate herb in Ayurvedic practice. And something you can have every day, and you can grow it yourself. And often I'll take cuttings and propagate them, then give them to my friends. It's a gift that keeps on giving, because the flowers are beautiful, but then it'll sprout and you can keep growing it. So Tulsi is fantastic like that. So you can give it away and you still get to keep it. And then if your Tulsi plants die, you go to your friends, hey, that cutting I gave you, can I get a cutting back? And that's happened to me because it doesn't like frost. So often, sometimes I've gone away overseas over the winter and the frost has killed my Tulsi plants. I've got cuttings back. So Tulsi is an amazing herb.
It's 2025, and you've surely heard about ice baths. And the benefits of cold plunging ranging from increasing levels of cold shock proteins and heat shock proteins. Yes, heat shock proteins also for longevity, the 250% increase in dopamine levels, the anti-inflammatory benefits, perhaps the upregulation of brown fat, leading to reduced visceral fat or the fat around your organs. But the real reason that a lot of Olympians and professional athletes use it actually has nothing to do with any of these. For more on this, you can check out episode number 154 on contrast therapy, using hot and cold baths, ice plunges, saunas, and breath work for peak performance.
I had another PhD student who's she's amazing, Lauren Byrne. She won the gold medal for Taekwondo at the Sydney Olympics, and she's in the Australian Sports Hall of Fame. So she's a super peak performer. And her PhD was interviewing people who had won multiple world championships. So they've been the world champion in their sport for multiple years, just to be on her interview list. And she asked them, what do you attribute your success to? How did you stay at the top of the world in your sport for multiple years? And I mean, she published a whole PhD on this, and she's published that. We've done a couple of academic papers on it. And some of the things that came up, mindset was the most important. One of the things that hadn't been that well talked about in the literature was social connection. Having a friendship group who appreciate you for who you are, not because you're a winner or a loser or whatever. But the thing that all the athletes did was ice bathing. And they said that they were introduced to ice bathing for recovery practices, for training, but they kept on doing it for the mental health benefits that it gave them. And they said, we didn't want to, no one wants to get into an ice bath, but when you're in an ice bath, it brings you into the present moment. You're not thinking about the competition or what happened yesterday or cursing yourself for not doing better. You're just creating a discipline of doing something that you didn't want to do and realizing you can do it. And they all continue the ice bathing for the mental health benefits. And now we know that there's research on depression with cold water swimming and ice bathing, for example. But there are mental health benefits that I think are quite underrated. A lot of people talk about ice bathing for the the physical benefits and the mental health and just the fact that you can force yourself to do something that you didn't really want to do and get a benefit from that is a really great practice. So I'd encourage people to find something you don't like to do and practice doing it.
At this point, I feel like we are really hammering the point that carbohydrates have an essential role in the human diet. I bring this up because I followed low carb and a ketogenic style, because I personally followed a low carbohydrate and ketogenic-ish meal template. I actually did carb backloading, where I would eat all of my carbs in the evenings for the last 7 or so years. And I really added a lot more carbohydrates into my diet last year in 2024 and felt a lot better. I felt more comfortable doing this after I read a couple of Joel Green's books on his immune-centric approach to health. If you find the world of nutrition complicated and confusing, I highly suggest you check out the full episode I recorded with Joel, which was number 167. In it, you'll also hear a very compelling case that he makes, arguing for and against both meat and plants. Essentially, he advocates an omnivorous diet. All right, enjoy this clip with Joel.
One of the things I hear in the low carb carnivore side often, all the time in comments actually, is that there are no such thing as essential carbohydrates. And yes, there are essential fats, there are essential amino acids, but no essential carbs. Can you explain why looking at it through that lens is inadequate, and how the body has to compensate and throw other systems out of balance if you just completely cut out and neglect what you call it, one guild from the diet completely?
Yeah, that's 20 years ago nutrition. I mean, I sat through a seminar in 2006 with Udo of Udo's Oil, who gave that argument, and he was carbs are not essential. He was given that whole thing, and a real nice guy, really knowledgeable guy. Here's the problem with that argument. We can reverse engineer the mechanisms of real and lasting health. And top of the list is insulin function. Insulin must operate efficiently. And when you break that down and you reverse engineer, well, what do you need to get that? You have to stimulate all the hormones involved. It's not just insulin, it's adiponectin, it's glucagon, it's GLP, GIP, adiponectin. So there's a family, but then it's also the microbiome. It's not just those hormones. So optimal insulin function rests on an optimized microbiome. And along with that is the gut immune axis. the gut immune axis is also essential for real and lasting health. So if what you're after is not a fad, is not some short-term improvement, but something true and real, then you have to take the long-term into account. And now, if we reverse engineer how are we going to get there, two things show up. You have to have bifidobacteria in the picture. Must have. It's a must-have mechanism because bifidobacteria sort of acts as the central gatekeeper in the gut immune axis. You have to have that. How do you get it? Carbs. The way to get like it's provable. Long-term carnivore diets will suppress bifidobacteria. For that reason alone, they disqualify themselves from being the thing that's going to give real and lasting health because you suppress bifidobacteria. But the other thing too is optimal insulin function, and the two work together. And so it's very complex, but through a number of mechanisms, through bile acid secretion and the impact of the gut immune axis on X receptors in the liver. There's a pathway which is the farnesoid receptor and liver X receptors, and that pathway dovetails with stress hormones like FGF 15 and 19. It governs a lot of things in the liver, and it's driven by ratios of things like bifidobacteria in the gut, which control bile acids. Optimal insulin function requires kind of this picture in the microbiome that's true for just about all humans. Now you can make an isolated case. That's not true for the Hazda. However, that's not to say that other bacteria that we haven't categorized aren't picking up the slack to perform the same thing. But basically, long story short, if we're going to reverse engineer how to get real and lasting health, we have to reverse engineer how to build optimal levels of the gut immune axis, which means bifidobacteria, which means the best way to get that is through carbs. And so while you can make an old school case to say carbs are not essential, in an updated understanding of real and lasting health, you can make a very good case. Actually, they're absolutely essential to feed the taxa that are essential in the gut. You can't feed them otherwise. Not only that, optimal insulin function requires carbs. What you see over and over and over is people who eliminate carbs from the diet. Eventually what happens is they get an improvement short term, but long term, they get insulin resistant and their fasting insulin goes high.
Okay. Arthritis is on the rise. And if you personally have it or you know someone that does, this could make a big difference in the way you approach it going forward. In episode number 141, Dr. Elizabeth Yurth explains a different paradigm, highlighting how arthritis is not just a wear and tear issue.
So what we learned is that osteoarthritis or wear and tear of joints is not a wear and tear disease like everybody will tell you. And it's the same thing that you're addressing with all these other processes that you're talking about. How do we protect the brain? How do we protect our hearts? How do we protect our muscles? This is all systemic processes that we have to get under control. And that some of us are genetically inclined, unfortunately, that when we have an injury, that it will stir off this inflammatory cascade that doesn't shut off normally. It sort of stays up. So perfect health, perfect case, everything's good. You've got perfect genetics. You're eating perfectly. Your health is perfect. You're exercising perfectly. You hurt yourself. And we see this cascade of inflammation, right? That's supposed to happen. But that should last a few days. And then your body comes in and starts promoting anti-inflammatory things. What we know is in people who have injuries, a lot of times, instead of that anti-inflammatory stage happening, the inflammatory stage just stays. And it stays and it stays and it stays. And that's what progresses these joints after an injury into developing osteoarthritis and then progressive osteoarthritis. And it's why really, it's such a controversial topic, because even in the functional medicine world, I see my colleagues not really paying attention to joints, right? They're like, well, you should just go see the orthopedist about your joints and they'll address everything else. This is a systemic issue. Let's get you healthy, but they won't really look at joints that way. And, and so I think we have to really start teaching that this is a pathologic process, even when all factors are equated for, like age and exercise level and diet and whether you're a smoker or not. If you have osteoarthritis, you have a 5-time higher likelihood of cardiovascular disease. So we know that this is a systemic disease process going on. And it's why if you replace a hip, all is not well, right? Sometimes you need to replace a hip. It's just too far gone. But what happens next? That person 2 years now needs their next hip replaced, and year after that needs their knee replaced, right? Because we have not treated the systemic disease process. So that's really been one of my goals, is because I'm coming from this from such a weird world of orthopedics to functional medicine or health-focused medicine. It's not what orthopedic doctors want to hear. There's a whole lot of money in replacing the hip. So the fact that you can avoid it is not really a well-liked thought among the medical community.
since recording this next interview that I'm about to play a clip from for you, I began introducing legumes into almost all of my meals. You're about to find out why. It's also one of the most compelling and heartbreaking stories that you'll hear, but luckily there's a positive ending. You can find the full episode for this one at mindbodypeak.com/138. And as a quick disclaimer, if you have SIBO or major gut issues, I recommend against immediately incorporating a bunch of complex carbohydrates such as legumes until you get your gut health under control. Only then will it provide the protective butyrate and short chain fatty acid production and other things that have cemented fiber and the other protective substances that have earned fiber's reputation as a super protector amongst nutritionists and longevity researchers.
I'm sure people are going to be curious. How did you get so involved in fiber in legumes?
It was to save my little girl's life. So I had 18 months old, and then I had two other children just slightly older. I had 3 children, 5 and under. And we moved into a home where they had just put down a new to the home carpet, although this carpet had been stored in man's garage for several years. Well, it was infested with carpet beetles, which we didn't know because they have to be in the warm to be able to hatch out. Anyway, they hatched out. All the larvae hatched into the little adult. They go through these stages. Anyway, they came out as carpet beetles. We had carpet beetles, not 10, not 100, not 1,000. We had hundreds of thousands, millions of carpet beetles everywhere because they put the carpet throughout the entire house. You open the sock drawer, they were running out of the sock drawer. You open the kitchen drawer, the silverware, everywhere. They were everywhere. We could not vacuum them up quick enough. You couldn't smash them, hit them. We were overwhelmed. And so we called the exterminator, and he came out and sprayed for them. It killed them all. And it also caused us all to be very sick. And my 18-month-old went into grand mal seizures. And so we, of course, rushed her into the hospital, and they said, no, this had nothing. I said, they just sprayed our house for bugs. They sprayed every square inch of the carpet. I think it has something to do with that. And I had some military training. I was in the United States Army. I knew that this was a nerve agent, and and that this could be a biological response to this particular nerve agent that they put on the carpet. And they said, no. She'd have to drink it was Dursban 2E. She'd have to drink it. They sprayed it on the carpet. This couldn't happen. I said, we're all sick. I was carrying a baby at that time. I began to miscarry that baby, and I did end up miscarrying that baby. It was a very horrific time. So they sent us back home, said, look, she has double pneumonia. I said, but if she was poisoned with a nerve agent, that's how they die with double pneumonia. Their lungs fill with fluid. They said, no, you're wrong. And they sent us back home, and I went back home. Now she's on loading doses of phenobarbital. And then she started with the same symptoms, which I trained all my troops on. This is what you need to look for nerve agent poisoning: pinpoint eyeballs, slight cough, diarrhea. Anyway, I said she had all those, but this time she's on phenobarbital. And I thought, she is going to die. She's going to die if I keep her. So I walked out of that house and said, I will not return until I get to the bottom of it. Now, you have to understand, we were in St. Louis Children's Hospitals where they were treating us. And they said that I was wrong. I was barking up the wrong tree. I had 9 neurologists in the same room with me, sat down and said, Mrs. Hurd, you were barking up the wrong tree. It was exactly their words. Mrs. Hurd, you were barking up the wrong tree. Your little girl was not poisoned. She has double pneumonia. She'll have to be on phenobarbital, loading doses, and on it the rest of her life. And so I said, just do a cholinesterase level. I begged them because I knew enough. I said, because of all my Army training, just do a cholinesterase level, because then you can check her liver to see what the liver enzymes of cholinesterase is, and then you can tell me if she's poisoned. There is no need to do that. It's a simple blood draw. It is a simple blood draw. It's a simple test. They refused to do it. Anyway, so I went home and I came out of that house and I said, I will never go back in that house again until we get to the bottom of it. So I called every poison control. I mean, you got a mad mama, okay? When you get a mama trying to protect her young, I was on the trail. And so I finally got a hold of the Poison Control Center in Dallas. They said, well, you could talk to Dr. Sheldon Wagner out in Corvallis at the university there. He knows child toxicology. I told him the whole story. He said, it's absolutely probably that your daughter was poisoned. Have you had the carpet test? I said, I want to do that, but the labs say they have to recalibrate their instruments, and it's thousands of dollars. My husband is a pastor of a church. We had no money. He said, send it to me for free, put on a dry ice because it breaks out at this rate. I sent it to him, his lab out in Corvallis at the university. He tested it. It was 100 times the normal strength that it should have been. And he said, why hasn't she had a cholinesterase level test? I said, because the doctors wouldn't do. Give me your doctor's name. Within 30 minutes, the doctor was calling me and saying, would you bring Ruth in for a cholinesterase level? Yes. Cholesterol level was positive. She'd been poisoned. It was 100 times the strength it should be. Actually, the Illinois EPA had to come out and take all of the carpet out and everything because it was so highly toxic. They had to haul it to a special waste facility, hazardous waste facility. It was so bad. But now, so I have a little girl. And so now they're all aware of the problem. They're testing her liver. She's dying, and she was dying. It was apparent to me. It was apparent. All of us was very sick. By this time, I'd miscarried this baby, and we were all very sick. My husband and my two other little older children, but my 18-month-old, she was not recovering. And they tested her liver enzymes. They're off the charts. They said, she's going to die. And there's nothing we can do. It's just a few more weeks, Mrs. Hurd. And I said, somebody, somewhere, help me. And I took her to specialists in Chicago. We conferred with specialists, of course, in St. Louis. We conferred on phone with specialists in Dallas, and they all said the same prognosis. She is not going to live. There's just no way her liver can detoxify from this poison. There's no way. And so I left Ruth. She's just 18 months old with my husband. And the other two kids, I said, I'm going to the Washington University Medical Library and I'm going to read. Nobody has an answer, but I'm going to see if there's any answer. And so I read about this thing called the enterohepatic recirculation and that we could pull toxins out if we had soluble fibers. So then I made a concoction of psyllium basically and beans. And then she wasn't eating at that time. I mean, she was languishing. She was almost gone. And I would shoot it with an oral syringe and make her swallow it, and she began to recover. And she was covered with warts. She was covered with everything because every virus took a hold too. I mean, everything was shot. I mean, it was really bad. And she began to recover. And in 6 weeks, she was completely well. And all the doctors, I mean, they were like, what happened? How could this be? And then it was in the newspapers. And then people started calling me and saying, what did you do? You saved your little girl. And it's like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. Hey, I'm not anything. I'm just trying to save my little girl. And she, by the way, is safe. She's 35 years old today. And she's married and has 2 little children. And so God saved her. But it was through soluble fiber. It was through these beans that people won't eat because they're afraid of gas and they don't understand. And so that's how I got into it all.
Are you experiencing any uncomfortable symptoms, debilitating symptoms, health conditions that just seem to be working against you? If so, this next clip could provide a powerful reframe that will help you discover the root cause of what's behind those symptoms and how those symptoms are actually benefiting your biology in some way. Not only that, but this alternative perspective can help you address the root cause so that you no longer have those symptoms. The system that we're diving into today is called German New Medicine. And if you want to learn more about it, you can check out episode number 148 with Dr. Melissa Sell.
He discovered this map that's always existed for how our tissues adapt to shocking circumstances. And so the main difference when you really start to understand the implications for what he discovered is that cancer, I used to think that cancer was a mistake, something going wrong in the body. Either your diet was bad, your immune system was low, you got exposed to something, it destroyed it damaged your genes in some way. Your genes now are, doing things they shouldn't be doing. And that cancer is this end result mistake. But what Dr. Hammer found is it's actually a functional, meaningful adaptation that's there for a specific biological purpose, depending on the nature of the type of shock that you had. So for him, he lost his son, so his psyche. So this is, the psyche is the subconscious mind. It's the part of your body that built your body, that runs your body. It's not your conscious mind that's thinking and, using words. This is beyond language. This is primal, adaptive consciousness that is keeping you alive in every moment. And so the psyche perceives everything that's going on. And if something in your environment is shocking to you, if you weren't expecting it, if it was highly acute, if you were caught on the wrong foot, the biology has the capacity to activate a significant biological special program. And so basically what this is, it's, I think of it in this kind of simplistic way of okay, I have a shock. And then depending on the type of shock, my brain has a panel of buttons. And it can activate when a certain button is pressed, depending again on what is needed for that shock. So do I need more oxygen in my blood? Do I need more bile in my digestive tract? Do I need more digestive juices in my colon? What do I need in that moment in order to help me better survive this thing that I'm dealing with? Do I need to enhance my ovaries? Do I need to enhance make my lymph nodes stronger and more robust? And so the psyche knows, the subconscious mind that built your body. Remember, this part of you built you. You didn't build your body, your subconscious mind did. And so that part knows exactly what is needed in that moment in order for you to survive. And so there's an impact in the brain. So that's that kind of button in the brain. We activate that and it enacts a cascade of changes at the tissue level. And so at the tissue level, we can grow extra cells, we can erode cells, or we can have a functional change in what that organ or tissue does. And it's kind of like we can become a transformer. So if you need more digestive juices, the big picture thing is Dr. Hammer at first thought that this was just for cancer, testicular cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer, but he found that these laws and the way the tissues operate, it's for everything from a pimple to a cold sore to an earache to a sty in your eye. Every single time there is something that's happening in the body, with the exception of injury, poisoning, and malnutrition. And so those are the three exceptions.
Do you view everything as a problem? Perhaps your stress is your advantage, propelling you forward, helping you get stuff done. Our guest in this next clip explains how you can use the sources of stress in your life to go inward and figure out what is causing that stress and how to interrupt those patterns that don't serve you the easy way. For the full interview, check out episode number 174 with Christopher Maher.
I know your negative stress management tools are really, really, really intense, and you've had some level of traumatic brain injury, which means you've hit your skull into something really, really hard. And so the first step is to get people out of that fight or flight response and deregulate them into a parasympathetic response. So now they're moving through the world, seeing the world for what's actually going on, as opposed to viewing the world from a fear-based position. Because when you're in a parasympathetic state, you see everything as wonderful. When you're in sympathetic, high state of response, you see everything as a problem that needs a solution. Stress is valuable. Stress is important as long as it gets you to take heartfelt action to your own benefit. But if you're outside of the ability to be able to take heartfelt action to your own benefit, this stress that you're experiencing is absolutely useless. So use your stress, use your addiction as motivators or inspirers to get you to go, whoa, why do I really drink caffeine? Why am I really smoking? Why am I really hyped up on this marijuana? Why do I need 3 or 4 bowls just to be able to go to work? Okay. Why do I need to be on these pharmaceuticals? Like, you've got to be asking yourself, what's going on inside of you that you're taking this easy street? Look, everyone pays the piper at the end of the day. So if you're on those substances, well, guess what happens? You end up with a horrible death, right? Anyone who's listening to the call, do yourself a favor, go down to the local nursing home, right? And if that's what you want for your elderly life, keep doing what you're doing. But if what you want is an opportunity to ascend when you feel like you're complete in this life and you want to be absolutely physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually present through the entirety of your life, then you've got to look at what you're putting in your body and what's in the way of you taking heartfelt action to your own benefit, because there's something in the way. And look, maybe this is just an ancestral pattern, but you got to interrupt the pattern. And as soon as you interrupt that pattern, guess what? A whole new world opens up to you, possibilities. Instead of anxiety, you got excitement. Instead of anger, frustration, agitation, irritation, you got love and care and kindness and compassion. Instead of fear, you got confidence. Okay, you got courage.
I used to think of personality, my own personality included, as something that was fixed. And then I noticed that some little shifts here and there changed who I was fundamentally. How often when you're working with someone do you see an anatomical cause such as a longer leg as a reason that their stress baseline is higher, or they're having other dysfunctions that are holding back who they want to show up as?
Every single time. The moment you get now I have a 5-day process that I take people through, right? They're seeing me twice a day. I'm getting into everything. I'm getting into their fascia. I'm getting to their muscles. I'm getting to their emotionality. I'm getting to their psychology. I'm getting to their energy. I'm getting to their moods. I'm getting into every part of them. We're just stripping things away, right? Well, and I tell them always on the first day, I go, look, just so you know, you're never going to be able to go back to the person that you were, because we're going to be creating such a successful pattern interrupt that there's no road back. So are you sure this is what you really want to do? Because you're going to be happier. You're going to be more present. You're going to be more loving. Your body's going to feel better. You're going to sleep better. Your life is going to make sense. You're going to forgive your parents. You and your husband are going to be able to move into more of a functional relationship. You're going to get along better. Like, is this what you really want? Because you got the opposite of this now. And then once we go in and we start making those shifts, then everything in the world changes because they're different. Everyone in the world treats them different.
For this last clip, it's a bit longer than the others simply because I think it's some of the most important information you can have around the supplements and substances worth prioritizing. If you've followed my work for a long time, you know that this is one of my foundational supplements that virtually everyone needs more of. This clip comes from an episode titled Rediscovering Ormus, quote, Black Gold, Marine Plasma, and Powerful Ancient Substances. For your reference, it was episode number 150 with David Reid, if you want to check it out.
Why are you so into minerals?
Well, I guess from my journey of defragging from the corporate world and going back into nature, I really connected deeply with the elements. And with the elements, I mean predominantly the sun and water and the earth being the minerals. And really the sun and the water being the ocean is the parents of the minerals. You know, salt, as an example, there's 12 main salts, and salt really is crystallized light, or it's like being dehydrated by the sun and comes from the ocean. So when I say the sun and the ocean are really the parents of salts and minerals, that's why I say that. And so the minerals are really the building blocks of the physical world, the entire material world. And an extension of that is life and biology. So minerals and everything on the periodic table are the building blocks of life and biology. And that is another way of saying that's the elements or the minerals. And so many of those minerals are no longer in our food because they're no longer in our soils anymore. So it's really important that we supplement those, because if we're depleted in our mineral composition or those building blocks, there's going to be some aspect of our expression which is compromised. And that can obviously lead to, disharmony in the body. There was actually a Nobel Prize winner last century, Linus Pauling, and he famously claimed that a lack of minerals in the body can be traced back to all disease in the body. So again, without those building blocks, because all the other nutrients are made from those too, like all your vitamins, all your amino acids, all your proteins, they're all made from those building blocks. So
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? I think that's an underlooked role and reason that minerals are so important. Because like when we talk about nutrients that are essential for the body, it's like, okay, we need our proteins, which are really just amino acids. Then we need our vitamins and then fish oil and all these things. And sometimes minerals are like an afterthought. They come after vitamins and minerals. But you just said that they are the building blocks for so much else in the body.
yeah, so if we were to go to, the first principles thinking has become like a trend in the last decade. And some of our great leaders and entrepreneurs think first principles with builders like an Elon Musk when it comes to a Tesla factory or
or just in his way of thinking, right? If we were to go to first principles of nutrition, what we would find is atoms. And what atoms are is minerals or elements on the periodic table. Like the only difference between one element and another element is the amount of protons and electrons in the atom. So I guess we go from the subatomic world into the atomic world, and first principles of nutrition is all of those mineral expressions on the periodic table. And that's what we're talking about here. It's the building blocks for everything else. So to your point, your proteins, your vitamins, your fats, anything you can think of is made from those building blocks. It's almost like Tetris, right? Like those building blocks are there and you need a certain combination of those building blocks or those Tetris blocks to produce a vitamin or to produce a molecule, if you will. So molecules are only combinations of the building blocks. And I mean, it's also an honor to the intelligence of the body, which we believe is the most intelligent technology in the universe. So if we give the body access to those building blocks, it's intelligent enough to take what it needs and actually produce a lot of those compounds and molecules. Our current conditioning doesn't necessarily allow for that. We still need proteins, vitamins. Like science says that we can't produce vitamins internally, but new science is showing that we absolutely can. Once we have access to these building blocks, our body can produce them internally. So our biological systems are changing along with everything else on the planet right now. And the greatest honor we can give our body from a nutritional perspective is to give it the minerals, because it is the building blocks of everything else.
You mentioned Linus Pauling earlier, and I think most people know of him, if they know of him, as the vitamin C guy, because that's what I knew him as. Then I was writing a post on minerals and trace minerals, and I came across that exact same quote that you just mentioned, that he viewed mineral deficiency as a root cause of all disease. And why don't we know these types of things? Like, how come so many times throughout history, different scientists and researchers have emphasized the importance of minerals and remineralization of our bodies, yet it's still an afterthought?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just science and marketing. We've been so focused, like you said, on proteins, amino acids, carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, without actually thinking, what are they made from? Like, what's the source of those? And I guess minerals are so abundant and they're so available that it's not, from a marketing perspective, it's not the best thing to be sharing with people, right? Like, you can go for a swim in the ocean and access a lot of the minerals for free that you can otherwise purchase. So I think there's multiple layers to the science. I mean, there was another beautiful doctor last century, Renee Quinton, who the Quinton ocean plasma is kind of birthed from his research, and he was curing tens of thousands of people throughout Egypt and France simply with giving them 10 mils of ocean water several times a day, which is amazing. And it totally makes sense because they're getting all of that, all of those minerals that they require again. And that's a big part of what we do at Maher as well, is have access to those minerals from the plant world and the ocean world. And that's why we're so passionate about it. It is such a great opportunity for the human body at the moment to come back online, recognizing that we're giving those minerals back to the body physically, but we're also electromagnetic beings. So, a huge part of minerals is conductivity. It's the old science experiment that most of us did at school, right? If we have distilled water and put a battery in there and a light bulb, there's no charge. The light bulb won't turn on. But as soon as we add minerals, the light bulb turns on because there's conductivity in the water. So our body being 99% water by molecular count, and a lot of people are now aware that, to drink a lot of water each day and stay hydrated. But the big missing link again is we're not water beings, we're salt water beings. So it's so important. And all of our functions, all of our cellular functions are based around mineral charge and cell membrane potential. It's really, really important that we not just stay hydrated, but we also stay mineralized.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Rene Quinton too, because he was the one who made me realize there's more to minerals than meets the eye. Didn't he have some kind of experiment or practice he did during one of the world wars where he would actually transfuse soldiers when they ran out of blood with minerals, and they did just fine?
Yeah, there's a beautiful website set up almost in reverence of Rene and several other doctors that have done amazing things with ocean water or ocean plasma, and it's simply called oceanplasma.org. It's a great website. It shows dozens of clinical studies.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I appreciate your time, your energy, and I would love to know what I missed. Which moment from Mind Body Peak Performance this year was your favorite? Leave a comment below, and I look forward to connecting with you. See you in the next one.
I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.